Thanks for joining us again here in our outdoor classroom. Today I'm joining you from the beautiful Bill Mason Center Forest, and we're excited to address some of the amazing questions that you had relating to the first video in our module series on winter adaptations and hibernation. We know this past week was probably quite busy for you and your teachers as you transitioned from learning at home back into the classroom, and thank you again so much for finding time in your schedule to join us in our series and for getting questions into us so we could answer them for you here today. Now again, we're not going to be able to address all of your questions in this one video, but we're hoping we can address many throughout the rest of the video series. We might already be talking about some of the questions that you've asked in the upcoming videos, so definitely check in for those. Now, one of the questions I'll start off with was, what do animals who are hibernating under the ground, how do they breathe under the ground? I can imagine for myself, I might get a little bit claustrophobic if I had to dig myself into a tunnel in the ground and then a blanket of snow covered me, sometimes tight spaces, and just feeling like you wouldn't be able to get enough air. But when animals go into their hibernation state, remember we talked about how they really slow down their breathing rate and they slow down their heart rate and their metabolism goes down. Once you're in this state of hibernation, you no longer need as much oxygen in order to stay alive. So when they get down into their little ground cavity or the tunnel and the hole that they've dug for themselves, I'm thinking of a chipmunk immediately. They have little tunnels, and so throughout the year, the air is getting into that space as creatures move around, and it's just there's a pocket of air there. And when the chipmunk goes into this little space under the ground to spend its winter, it can use up the oxygen that's in that little space in the ground. And that hole may become covered with snow at some point, but there is enough air in that space with the lowered heart rate and breathing rate for the little animals that are in that hibernation state to continue to get enough oxygen to survive.
What? Oh my gosh, friends, this is so cool. So I've just come across some evidence of one of our wild animals that lives out here that you had a few questions about. The animal I'm talking about is the snowshoe hare. Now, the first question that I want to answer is about their feet. You had asked why they have such big feet. Now, I don't know if you can see what's on my feet today, but I have these long extension things on my feet called snowshoes, and they help me to stay on top of the snow a little bit. I can sink in a little bit, but not all the way when the snow's really deep. So they help to keep me floating or on top of the snow. So our snowshoe hare, notice that same word, I'm wearing snowshoes, snowshoe hare, have really big back feet to help them float or stay on top of the snow as they're moving in the wintertime. So this is an area that I've just come across that I can see a lot of evidence of the snowshoe hare. These little round things are their droppings or their scat or their poop, as you might call it. And so one evidence that I know they've been here. Another one is that I can see that some of the branches here have been chewed off, and I know that they've been eating in this area. So we have snowshoe hare moving about here in the wintertime. Now, one thing we talked about last week was camouflage. Remember, I'm not very well camouflaged, but they do because their fur turns white. Now, what happens is as the daylight starts to get shorter, you might remember, in the fall, it tells their body that it's time to get rid of those brown hairs and they grow white fur. So the brown hair just kind of fluffs off, like if you have a cat or a dog that sheds, it sheds. And that white hair grows in, replacing it. Another question you had relates to our snowshoe hare and our deers. You asked why they have such big ears. Now, those big ears are a bit of an adaptation, do you remember that word? For survival. Those big ears allow them to hear lots of things that are happening around them. They can turn their ears in the direction of that they're hearing things. And it allows them to be able to tell if there's a predator or danger nearby. Something that you can try is cupping your hands around your ears and seeing if it helps you hear things any better in a certain direction. I can hear the birds. They sound like they're pretty close. Some of you had some really interesting questions about the video footage caught on the trail cam. So one of the questions was about whether the animals seen on the trail cam were actually white. And one example was the fox, and maybe wondering if it was a white fox. The fox that was caught on the trail cam is actually a red fox, but during the nighttime when they're active, when you think of nocturnal animals, they are most likely to be caught moving around on the trail cam, and they would show up as white. So any animal would show up as white because the camera at night can only pick up the white and the black. And so it makes it stand out with the rest of the darkness by making it white. And if you were to see that fox during the day, it would still be its regular red color. So take a look at this video that was taken of the red fox during the day. Another one of your questions was about whether the animals on the trail cam are actually captured, because you may have heard some of us saying we caught this great fox on the trail cam, or wow, look at the snowshoe hare that we caught on the trail cam. When we say that we caught or we captured, we mean we are taking a picture or a video of them. We don't actually mean that we're capturing them. That's one of the really fun, interesting things about the trail cam, is that you get to leave animals in their element, doing their own thing, and we get a close-up look at them without even having to go near them. So all we mean by them being caught or captured is that their picture has been taken or a video has been taken.
You may have noticed when you were out in your neighborhood that around the base of some of the deciduous trees, you're starting to see seeds falling. You can see that the outer part of the seed, or the sheath, looks a little bit like a bird's foot. And then inside that outer layer is this small teardrop-shaped seed. And so this is the outside protection, and there's the actual seed that's going to grow into a tree. This is the yellow birch, and during this time of the year, the yellow birch will drop its seeds right in the snow. And that means that come spring, those seeds will be the first thing to hit the ground, and they'll have all of the water from the melting snow to help them grow. Also, if their seeds are in the snow and more snow falls on top of them, then they're protected from the chickadees and the birds that are trying to eat them. So it might be a great adaptation to drop your seeds at this time of year. What do you think? One of the questions that you had about how plants adapt to winter was, why do cedar hedges, pine trees, and spruce trees, why do they stay green all year long? It has a lot to do with the way that they store water. In winter, it is much more difficult for plants and animals to access water. Most of the water is frozen because the temperatures are so cold and the environment's so harsh that if they can't store the water in their leaves or trunk, then they can't really get it from anywhere else. If you notice, out in the forest, all the puddles are dried up, the ponds are frozen, so it's really difficult to access water. So if you can't store it, then it makes it hard to make your own food if you're a plant, or to survive. So the needles of coniferous trees or evergreen trees, they are skinny and flat, and they have a waxy coating on them, which means that they're able to store water inside their needles and their trunks a lot better than deciduous trees that have big leaves that are more delicate. So if they're able to store water in a better way, that means that they're able to use that water along with chlorophyll and the sun and carbon dioxide to make their own food through photosynthesis. Is that a new word for you? If photosynthesis is a new word for you, I encourage you to look it up. If you can't look it up yourself, get an adult or someone that you know to help you to look it up. And it'll help you to learn about how plants and trees create their own food. Whereas animals like you and I, we have to go to the refrigerator or we have to catch food out in the natural environment.
We'd like to thank you for submitting such amazing questions this week. We couldn't possibly answer them all, but we've tried to do our best in grouping them together and answering as many as we possibly could. Also, a huge thank you to Bridlewood Community Elementary School, who took David up on his challenge this week and explored their schoolyard and found some galls. Take a look at these images they sent us of their explorations. Thank you so much again for joining in and watching our videos. We hope you tune in next week when we release our next module all about animal tracking.